Hey, friends, I want you to think about something for just a moment before we get into this. Think about the last time you walked into a room and completely forgot why you went there. Think about the last time a name that you have known for years simply would not come to you when you needed it. Think about the last time you read something, put it down, and realized 20 minutes later that almost none of it had stuck. Now I want you to think about where you were the night before each of those moments, what you were doing in the hours before you went to sleep. Because I can tell you with a high degree of clinical confidence that what was happening in your bedroom, your living room, and your kitchen the previous evening had a direct and measurable connection to those cognitive failures the next day. I am Dr. William Lee. I have spent 25 years studying the relationship between lifestyle, vascular biology, and the way the human body ages. And in that time, I have come to believe that the conversation we are not having in mainstream medicine, the conversation that almost never happens in a 15-minute primary care appointment, is the one about what people are doing at night, not what they are eating for breakfast, not what supplements they are taking in the morning, what they are doing in those quiet hours between dinner and sleep, because those hours, night after night, over months and years, are either building a resilient, sharp, well functioning brain or they are quietly dismantling one. Today, I'm going to walk you through 5 specific nighttime habits that the research clearly identifies as significant contributors to accelerating memory loss, cognitive decline, and neurological deterioration in adults over 50. These are habits that tens of millions of people engage in every single night, habits that feel completely ordinary. Habits that your doctor has almost certainly never flagged in a routine appointment, not because they do not matter, but because the medical system is not designed to have that conversation. A comprehensive review published in the journal Nature Reviews Neuroscience analyzed data from over 89 longitudinal studies on lifestyle factors and cognitive aging in adults over 50. The review concluded that modifiable nighttime behavioral patterns accounted for a statistically significant portion of the variance in cognitive decline trajectories independent of genetic risk factors. In plain language, what that means is that how you spend your nights matters enormously for your brain, and it is within your power to change it. The full references are in the description below, as always. Before we get into the list, I want to ask you something. Drop a comment and tell me which of these habits you suspect you might be guilty of before you even hear the full list. You might already have a feeling. I read every single comment, and your honesty genuinely helps me understand what guidance this community needs most. Let's get into it and stay until number 1, because that particular habit is something that the majority of adults over 50 in this country do every single night without the faintest idea of the neurological price they are paying for it. Habit number 5 is sleeping in a room that is too warm. I know that sounds almost insultingly simple, but bear with me because the science behind this is both fascinating and genuinely alarming in terms of what a few degrees of temperature difference in your bedroom can mean for the health of your brain over years and decades. Here is the biology you need to understand. Your body's core temperature follows a precise circadian rhythm. In the hours leading up to sleep, your core temperature naturally begins to drop. This temperature decline is not incidental. It is one of the primary physiological triggers for sleep onset, and more critically, for the depth and architecture of your sleep once it begins. Specifically, the transition into slow wave sleep, the deepest and most neurologically restorative stage, is tightly coupled to this core temperature drop. When your bedroom is too warm, your body cannot execute this temperature decline efficiently. The result is that you spend less time in slow wave sleep and more time in lighter, fragmented sleep stages that do not provide the neurological restoration your brain requires. Research from the National Sleep Foundation and independently confirmed by studies at Harvard Medical School's Division of Sleep Medicine found that the optimal bedroom temperature for adults over 50 is between 65 and 68 degrees Fahrenheit. For every 2 degrees above that range, the proportion of slow wave sleep in the night's architecture decreases measurably. Adults who sleep in rooms consistently above 72 degrees show on average a 22% reduction in slow wave sleep duration compared to those sleeping in the optimal range. Now, here is why this matters specifically for your memory. Slow wave sleep is the stage during which your brain consolidates procedural and declarative memory, transferring the experiences, conversations, and information of the day from short-term hippocampal storage into long-term cortical networks. When slow wave sleep is consistently shortened by even an hour over months and years, this consolidation process is chronically incomplete. The memories that should be making the journey from temporary to permanent storage are instead degrading and dissolving. And because this happens gradually, most people do not connect their worsening recall to the temperature of the room they have been sleeping in for the past decade. There is a second mechanism here that is less widely known but equally important. Your brain's glymphatic clearance system, which flushes the toxic waste proteins linked to Alzheimer's disease from brain tissue during sleep, is temperature sensitive. Research from the University of Rochester's Center for Translational Neuromedicine found that even modest elevations in brain temperature during sleep reduced glymphatic flow rates significantly. A warmer sleeping environment means a warmer brain, and a warmer brain during sleep means less efficient clearance of amyloid beta and tau proteins, the exact proteins whose accumulation defines the pathology of Alzheimer's disease. The fix here could not be more straightforward. Lower your thermostat to between 65 and 68 degrees before bed. If that is not possible due to climate or household circumstances, use a fan directed away from you to create air circulation, which facilitates the evaporative cooling your body needs. Use breathable, natural fiber bedding, cotton or linen rather than synthetic materials that trap heat. Consider cooling mattress pads, which have become increasingly affordable and which research from the journal Sleep has shown can improve slow-wave sleep duration by up to 34% in older adults compared to standard bedding. This is one of the lowest effort, highest impact changes you can make for your brain tonight. Habit number 4 is using your phone as an alarm clock. And I want to be very specific about why this particular habit is so damaging, because it is not simply about the blue light from the screen before bed, which is a concern, but a relatively minor one compared to what I am about to describe. The real danger of having your phone on your nightstand charged and active throughout the night is a combination of 3 interconnected problems that most people have never considered together. The first problem is notification arousal. Even when your phone is on silent or do not disturb mode, the vast majority of adults over 50 do not have these settings configured comprehensively. Notifications from email, news apps, social media, and family messaging groups create what sleep researchers call micro-arousals, brief transitions from deeper to lighter sleep stages that last only seconds but are neurologically significant. A study published in the journal JAMA Internal Medicine fitted participants with sleep monitoring equipment and found that adults who kept their phones within arm's reach during sleep experienced an average of 11 additional micro-arousals per night compared to those who slept without a phone in the room. 11 additional interruptions, most of which the sleeper had no conscious awareness of and could not report the following morning. Each micro-arousal pulls your brain out of whatever sleep stage it has progressed into and forces it to restart the descent into deeper sleep from a shallower baseline. Over the course of a night, this fragmentation meaningfully reduces the total time spent in both slow-wave and REM sleep stages, the 2 stages most critical for memory consolidation and neurological repair. Over the course of months and years, the cumulative effect on cognitive function is substantial. The second problem is anticipatory vigilance. When your phone is physically present in your sleeping environment, your brain maintains a low-level awareness of its presence even during sleep. This is a hardwired survival mechanism. Your brain is conditioned to treat your phone as a potential source of urgent information, and it never fully releases that vigilance when the device is within reach. Electroencephalography studies from the Sleep Research Society have shown that adults who sleep with their phones on their nightstands display measurably higher levels of alpha wave activity during the first sleep cycle compared to those who sleep without a phone present. Alpha waves during sleep indicate a brain that is partially alert rather than fully surrendered to deep rest. It is the neurological equivalent of sleeping with one eye open. The third problem is morning exposure. Most people who use their phone as an alarm reach for it within 30 seconds of waking and immediately begin processing notifications, news, messages, and social media content. Research from the University of California, Irvin found that this immediate morning screen exposure creates what they termed cognitive fragmentation in the first hour of waking, disrupting the consolidation of overnight memory processing that the brain completes in the period immediately following sleep. The memories that your brain was in the final stages of locking into long-term storage during your last REM cycle are most vulnerable in that first waking hour, and flooding your mind with new stimuli from a screen in those critical minutes is genuinely interfering with that process. Buy a simple bedside alarm clock. They cost less than $15. Put your phone in a different room at night. This single structural change eliminates all three of these problems simultaneously, and the research suggests it will meaningfully improve both your sleep quality and your next day cognitive performance almost immediately. Habit number three is skipping a consistent bedtime. And when I bring this up with patients, they often dismiss it with a smile. I'm not a child, Dr. Lee. I don't need a bedtime. And I understand that response. The idea of a fixed bedtime feels infantilizing to most adults. But what I'm about to explain has nothing to do with childhood sleep routines and everything to do with the molecular biology of your brain's timekeeping system. And once you understand it, you will never be casual about irregular sleep timing again. Your brain runs on what is called a circadian rhythm, a roughly 24-hour internal clock that governs not just your sleep and wake cycles, but the timing of virtually every significant biological process in your body. Hormone release, immune function, cellular repair, metabolic regulation, and critically, the specific neurological processes associated with memory formation and consolidation are all timed against this internal clock. When you maintain a consistent sleep schedule, going to bed and waking at approximately the same time every day, your circadian system is synchronized, and all of these processes occur on schedule at the right times with the right intensity. But when your sleep timing is irregular, going to bed at 10 p.m. on Monday, midnight on Tuesday, 9 p.m. on Wednesday, and 1 a.m. on Thursday, your circadian system becomes what chronobiologists call desynchronized. And the consequences of that desynchronization for your brain are severe. Research published in the journal Scientific Reports analyzed the sleep patterns of over 61,000 adults using wrist-worn accelerometers over a period of 7 days. They developed a metric called social jet lag, which measures the degree of mismatch between an individual's weekday and weekend sleep timing. Every 1 hour increase in social jet lag was associated with a 33% increase in the odds of having poor cognitive performance on standardized memory and executive function assessments. Adults with irregular sleep timing equivalent to a 2-hour nightly variation showed cognitive performance scores comparable to those of adults 5 to 7 years older with regular sleep patterns. There is a specific molecular mechanism behind this that centers on a protein called period 2, one of the core molecular components of your internal clock. Period 2 expression in hippocampal neurons regulates the timing of BDNF synthesis, the brain's primary growth and maintenance factor. When your sleep timing is irregular, period 2 expression in the hippocampus becomes erratic. BDNF synthesis loses its rhythmic pattern, and the synaptic maintenance and memory consolidation processes that BDNF governs become inconsistent and unreliable. After the age of 55, your circadian system is already naturally less robust than it was in younger years. The suprachiasmatic nucleus, the brain region that serves as the master clock, loses neurons progressively with age, making the system more vulnerable to disruption. An older circadian clock with fewer neurons to maintain it is significantly more sensitive to the destabilizing effects of irregular sleep timing than a younger one. Pick a bedtime and a wake time. Hold to them within 30 minutes on weekends and days off as well as weekdays. This consistency is not a small lifestyle adjustment. It is a fundamental act of neurological maintenance that your brain's timekeeping machinery depends on to do the memory and repair work that protects your cognitive function year after year. Habit number 2 is sleeping with the television on. I have to tell you that when I bring this up in clinical consultations, the response is almost always the same. But Dr. Lee, the television helps me fall asleep. I cannot fall asleep in silence. The background noise is comforting, and I hear that. I understand it. Many people develop this habit after the loss of a partner, after a period of anxiety, after a life transition that made silence feel uncomfortable rather than peaceful. I am not dismissing the emotional dimension of this habit, but I need to tell you what is happening in your brain throughout the night when that television stays on, because it is one of the most consistently damaging things you can do to your memory and cognitive function over time. The problem is not falling asleep with the television on. The problem is staying asleep with it on. And here is why that distinction matters enormously. Once you are asleep, your brain does not stop processing auditory information. Your auditory cortex remains partially active throughout the night, monitoring sound in your environment for potential threats. This is an evolutionary survival mechanism. It kept your ancestors alive in environments where a sudden sound in the night meant genuine danger. In your bedroom in the modern world, it means that the changing volume, dialogue, music, and laugh tracks of late night television are being continuously processed by a brain that is simultaneously trying to perform the deepest and most critical work of its entire day. Research from Johns Hopkins University's School of Medicine found that adults who slept with ambient sound present, including television audio, showed significantly elevated levels of cortisol measured in morning blood samples compared to those who slept in silence or with consistent low level white noise. The varied and unpredictable nature of television audio, the sudden rise in volume during commercials, the emotional register of dramatic dialogue, the bursts of music, triggers repeated microactivations of your stress response throughout the night that you are entirely unaware of, but that your cortisol levels reveal clearly the following morning. Elevated overnight cortisol, as I mentioned in an earlier discussion, directly suppresses the production of BDNF and interferes with the hippocampal memory consolidation process. But in the context of television sleep specifically, there is an additional layer of damage that comes from light exposure. Television screens emit light that fluctuates in both intensity and color temperature throughout the night. Even at low brightness, this flickering light penetrates closed eyelids and signals to your suprachiasmatic nucleus that the environment is not fully dark. Your brain interprets this as incomplete night, which suppresses melatonin production and delays or shortens the deep sleep stages your memory systems depend on. A study from the National Institutes of Health that monitored older adults over multiple nights with and without television found that on television nights, participants spent 67 fewer minutes in combined slow wave and REM sleep compared to nights when the television was off. 67 minutes. In the context of a night's sleep, that is not a minor difference. That is the difference between a brain that has had adequate time to consolidate the day's memories, clear its metabolic waste, and repair its synaptic connections, and a brain that has been cheated out of more than an hour of its most critical restoration work. If silence feels uncomfortable, replace the television with a white noise machine or a simple fan. These provide the auditory comfort and masking of environmental sounds that many people need without the cognitive disruption of varied content. Brown noise, in particular, a lower frequency variant of white noise, has been shown in research from the University of Toronto to actually enhance slow wave sleep depth in older adults by masking disruptive sound frequencies while not creating the cortisol activating pattern variation that television audio produces. Your bedroom deserves to be a sanctuary of darkness, coolness, and consistent sound. What you put in that environment at night is not neutral. It is either supporting your brain's most important work or it is interrupting it continuously for 8 hours. The television, as comforting as it feels, is interrupting it. And now we arrive at habit number 1, the nighttime habit that is present in the routines of the majority of adults over 50 in this country. The one that has the most comprehensive and well-documented body of research connecting it to accelerated cognitive decline. The one that almost every person who does it has never once been counseled about by their physician. And the one that, perhaps more than any other single behavioral pattern, explains the epidemic of memory loss and cognitive deterioration that we are seeing in the senior population right now. Habit number 1 is chronic overnight dehydration. And before you tell me that you drink plenty of water during the day, I want you to understand why daytime hydration and overnight hydration are two entirely different problems with two entirely different neurological consequences, and why the gap between when most people take their last drink of the day and when their brain actually needs fluid for its most critical overnight processes is one of the most overlooked contributors to cognitive decline in the entire field of aging medicine. Here's the physiology. Your brain is approximately 73% water. The cerebrospinal fluid that bathes your brain and spinal cord that serves as the medium through which the glymphatic system flushes toxic waste proteins from brain tissue is almost entirely water. During an average night of sleep, you lose between 16 and 28 ounces of fluid through respiration and perspiration alone, without taking a single sip to replace it. For a young person with robust fluid regulation mechanisms, this overnight fluid deficit is managed reasonably well. For an adult over 55, it is a much more serious problem. After the age of 55, your kidneys become less efficient at conserving water during sleep. Your body's sensitivity to thirst signals declines by as much as 40%, according to research from the National Institute on Aging, which means you wake up significantly less thirsty than your actual level of dehydration warrants. You feel fine. you drink your morning coffee, which has mild diuretic properties that compound the dehydration further, and you spend the first several hours of your day in a state of clinically significant fluid deficit that your thirst mechanism is no longer reliably alerting you to. But here is where this becomes directly and specifically devastating for your memory. The glymphatic system that clears amyloid beta and tau from your brain tissue during sleep operates through the movement of cerebrospinal fluid through channels called the perivascular spaces. The driving force behind this fluid movement is osmotic pressure, the difference in solute concentration between your blood and your cerebrospinal fluid. When you are even mildly dehydrated, this osmotic gradient shifts and glymphatic flow rates decrease proportionally. Research published in the journal Acta Neuropathologica found that chronic mild dehydration during sleep was associated with a 36% reduction in overnight amyloid beta clearance in aging rodent models. And subsequent human observational studies have found that adults with chronically low morning hydration markers show significantly higher rates of amyloid accumulation on PET imaging over time. There is a second mechanism at work that is equally significant and less commonly discussed. Your hippocampus is particularly sensitive to hydration status because of its extraordinarily high metabolic activity during memory consolidation. Research from King's College London found that even mild dehydration equivalent to a 1 to 2% loss of body water produced measurable shrinkage in hippocampal volume on MRI imaging and was associated with significant impairment in short-term memory performance in adults over 50. The hippocampus, already the most vulnerable brain structure to age-related atrophy, is further compromised in volume and function every single night that you go to sleep insufficiently hydrated. I had a patient I'll call Carol, 72 years old, from Minneapolis, Minnesota. Carol had been managing what her previous physician had labeled age-related memory changes for about 3 years. She was forgetting appointments. She was struggling to retain the details of conversations. She had stopped volunteering for the reading program she had participated in for a decade because she felt she could no longer reliably remember the names and stories of the children she worked with. When she came to me, she was genuinely grieving the version of herself she felt she was losing. When we went through her daily habits in detail, her hydration pattern stood out immediately. Carol drank most of her fluids before 2 p.m. She had deliberately reduced her evening fluid intake years earlier to minimize nighttime trips to the bathroom, a common and completely understandable adjustment that millions of older adults make. By the time she went to bed at 10 p.m., she had often not had a meaningful amount of water for 6 or 7 hours. We implemented a targeted hydration strategy. In the hour before bed, Carol began drinking 8 ounces of water with a small amount of added electrolytes, specifically sodium, potassium, and magnesium, in a ratio that research from the journal Nutrients identifies as optimal for overnight fluid retention and cellular hydration. The electrolytes are critical here because plain water consumed before bed is partially excreted before it can be fully utilized. Electrolyte-enhanced water is retained at a significantly higher rate by the body's cells, maintaining hydration status through the overnight hours when fluid intake is not possible. We also address the nighttime bathroom concern directly by timing the electrolyte water to be consumed 60 to 90 minutes before sleep, allowing partial urination before bed while still maintaining meaningful overnight hydration. Carol's kidneys, like most older kidneys, had reduced concentrating ability at night, meaning that reducing evening fluid intake entirely had been creating a far greater overnight deficit than the bathroom trips she was trying to avoid. Within 60 days, Carol reported noticeable improvements in her morning mental clarity. Within 4 months, her recall of names had improved to a degree that she described as returning to how she had been 3 years earlier. She went back to her reading program. Her follow-up cognitive assessment showed a 23% improvement in working memory performance and a significant improvement in verbal recall scores, not from a drug, not from an expensive intervention, from drinking 8 ounces of electrolyte water before bed every night. There's a third dimension to overnight dehydration that I want to leave you with because it connects everything we have discussed today into a single coherent picture. Every one of the other 4 habits on this list, the warm bedroom, the phone on the nightstand, the irregular sleep schedule, the television, works at least partly through the same final common pathway. They all disrupt the architecture of your sleep, robbing your brain of the deep slow wave and REM stages it needs. But they do this against the backdrop of a brain that, for most older adults, is already struggling with the fundamental biological challenge of having insufficient fluid to run its overnight maintenance systems at full capacity.
Overnight dehydration is not a standalone problem. It is a force multiplier. It takes every other source of overnight neurological stress and amplifies its impact. A brain that is adequately hydrated is more resilient to temperature disruptions, to notification arousals, to circadian desynchronization, to the cortisol elevations of television noise.
A brain that is chronically dehydrated during its most critical working hours is operating without the most basic physical substrate it needs to protect and preserve itself. I want to leave you with something that I find genuinely meaningful and that I think about often in my clinical work with older adults. Every night you go to sleep, your brain is trying to do something extraordinary. It is trying to take the chaos and stimulation and information of an entire day and transform it into something organized, stored, and retrievable. It is trying to clean itself of the waste that accumulates from a full day of thinking and feeling and living. It is trying to repair the cellular wear and tear of waking life and prepare itself to function at full capacity for another day. It is doing all of this silently, invisibly, while you lie still with your eyes closed, completely unaware of the magnitude of the biological work being performed on your behalf. And what we have discussed today is simply this: 5 common nighttime habits are systematically interfering with that work, night after night, year after year, in tens of millions of people who have never been told the connection and who are attributing the cognitive consequences to something inevitable, something genetic, something beyond their influence. It is not beyond your influence. A cooler bedroom, a clock instead of a phone, a consistent bedtime, silence instead of television, and 8 ounces of electrolyte water before you close your eyes. These are not dramatic sacrifices. They are not expensive interventions. They are not asking you to rebuild your life from the ground up. They are 5 specific, evidence-backed, immediately actionable changes that the research says will give your brain the conditions it needs to protect, maintain, and in many cases, meaningfully restore the memory and cognitive function that defines your independence, your relationships, and your quality of life in the years ahead. Start tonight, not next week, not after you finish the series you are watching, tonight. If this video gave you something real today, something your doctor has never taken the time to explain in a routine appointment, please share it with someone in your life who needs to hear it. The person who falls asleep with the television on every night, the friend who jokes about their memory but is quietly frightened, the spouse who has been chalking up their cognitive changes to getting older without knowing that getting older does not have to mean this. Subscribe to this channel if you have not already. Every week, I bring you research-backed guidance designed specifically for adults over 50 who are serious about protecting what matters most. And leave me a comment below before you go. Tell me which of these 5 habits hit closest to home for you. And tell me which one you are changing tonight. I read every single comment. Your answers matter to me, and they shape what I create for this community every week. Take care of yourself. Your brain has been working hard for you every single day of your life. It is time to return the favor. I will see you in the next video.